Yeah,
Jason McCoy, welcome. How you doing, man?
doing good, man. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. I love highlighting nonprofits, anybody doing great things for our veterans and offering a different approach to healing. And I saw you guys on Instagram and I'm like, I need to bring these guys on. I need to hear your story, Jason. I need to hear how you came up with ENDEX Archery.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short and sweet,
Oh,
but it
no,
is
no. This is not the place for short and sweet, goddamn. I want fucking let's start off with how you found yourself in the military.
perfect. Yeah, so grew up in South Louisiana, just south of Baton Rouge.
I couldn't tell.
Um, yeah, the military kind of stripped the accent away, especially during basic. I got made fun of a lot. Um, but yeah, grew up in South Louisiana. Both of my grandfathers were military veterans. My dad was career law enforcement. He did 27 years.
Oh,
Broke
dang.
his back riding horses and wasn't able to join the military, but always wanted to. But anyway, just kind of, that kind of upbringing definitely, I grew up in the swamps, man. And I like to tell people I fell for the government's long-term recruitment strategy. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s and movies like Top Gun and, um, video games, all that stuff. So I knew from a very early age that I wanted to join the military. I think I went to my first air show. It was the Belle Chase just outside of New Orleans. Belle Chase Naval Air Station has an air show every year. And I got to see the Blue Angels fly for the first time at like 6. And I said, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of evolved over time. My grandfather, I was blessed to be able to grow up right next to one set of grandparents. And so I had a really close relationship with them. He was a Navy vet. And he kind of talked me out of the Navy. So then I started looking towards the Marine Corps. I went through scouting, using that as a tool to prep for the military. Because as a kid, you're told, if you're an Eagle Scout, you can join depending on the branch, you can join as an E2 or an E3. So that spoke to me. In high school, I joined, my high school had a Navy Junior ROTC program. So again, signed up for that. Did that for 4 years. And one of my mentors there was a retired master guns from the Marine Corps, Top Daily. And I was set on joining the Marine Corps. I mean, all the way up until I left for Air Force basic training, I still had a Marine Corps flag hanging in my room. Um,
That's a hell of a left turn, man.
yeah, what ultimately got me was, and I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason, right? When you hear my story, it couldn't have happened any other way, right? So I was dead set on joining the Marines. A couple of my buddies that were a year ahead of me in high school, they did join the Marines, and I was prepping to follow them. And I was still 17 when I signed my enlistment contract. So my dad, being in law enforcement, he worked with, I'd probably say 80% of the guys on his shift were all veterans.
Hmm.
And I joined in 2007. So a lot of those guys were either Desert Storm or GWAT veterans from early Iraq, early Afghanistan, that sort of thing. And all the Marines that he worked with, they were typical Marines, right? They're a little unhinged. He worked with a lot of 0311s and some MPs and stuff like that. But he came to me one day and he was like, look, he's like, I've been talking with all the guys at work. And he's like, if you really want to join the Marine Corps, me and your mom will support that and sign your contract. But he's like, I'd really like you to take a look at the Air Force. Everyone that he worked with told him like, hey, if it were my boy, I'd have him join the Air Force, better quality of life, better schooling, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of threw my nose up to it because I had the same impression of the Air Force just from being around other veterans. The Air Force is the butt of many jokes.
Yeah.
And so that kind of rubbed off on me as a 17-year-old kid who thought he knew everything but didn't. But then I had a chance encounter with one of my best friends growing up in high school. His uncle was a retired Air Force OSI special agent. And this dude was a millionaire. He ran his own private security company, did consulting work. And he sat me down one day and I was telling him, like, yeah, I'm going to join the Marines. And he's like, have you looked at the Air Force? And I was like, no, not really. And he actually did counterintelligence work for the SR-71 platform. And he told me a little bit about what that was like. And I'm like, damn, that sounds pretty cool. So anyway, my dad gets his wish. And one day I walk into the Air Force recruiter's office and he shows me the video. He's got one of those 2-in-1 combo TV with the VCR and he pops in this video and it's Air Force Special Tactics. And it's, it's dudes on helicopters
Yep.
and it's CCTs doing their thing and it's a couple BERT runs from an
Hell
A-10. And
yeah.
I remember there was these dudes on four-wheelers like coming over the mountains. You're just like, man, that looks awesome. I didn't know the Air Force did stuff like that. And my recruiter, being a recruiter, he's like, yeah, man, like, and you're an Eagle Scout. He's like, we've got this job called SEER, and they're under special tactics. And I throw up quotes. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for the SEER specialists that I've worked with, but I throw up air quotes. And I'm like,
Everybody
okay,
knows what you mean. Everybody.
yeah. I'm like, what do they do, man? And he's like, well, they go in and they rescue POWs. And I'm like, what? That sounds awesome. So the pitch that my recruiter gave me was kind of a blend of what pararescue and a little bit of what SEER does, but he definitely told me more of pararescue's job. Um, and I guess there was a quota for SEER instructors at that time or whatever. He never even told me about TAC P. But anyway, that's what I get a guaranteed contract for. I go into the Air Force to be a SEER specialist. And when I joined basic training, we were put in there was this experimental thing going on with all the special tactics jobs were put into one basic training flight.
Mhm.
So you got extra PT, and at the time you had to take the physical agility and stamina test, the PASS test. So it was basically your Air Force PT test with stricter standards plus a swim and pull-ups. And the swim, the distance on that was different for if you were SEER versus CCT versus PJ, whatever. So all through basic training, we're doing this extra stuff. We're taking our PASS test, but they would break us up into groups and they'd let you go with the cadre from your NDOC and have some I guess pre-NDOC time with those guys. So about the second time that me and the rest of the SEER specialist candidates from my basic training flight went over to the base Medina where they do all that stuff, and we meet with the SEER guys. And I'm just not liking what I'm hearing. They keep talking about when you get to Fairchild Air Force Base and when you get in the classroom. And I wanted to hear more about the deployments and that kind of stuff. Again, I'm 17, or I had just turned 18, full of piss and vinegar. I'm going to single-handedly cut the head off the snake of terror. You know what I mean? I'm that guy. And these dudes are like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, we're SEER instructors. We teach survival school. Like, yeah, sometimes we deploy. We might be in a joint personnel recovery center, looking at maps and stuff and talking about evasion plans, but we're not kicking doors down. And I'm like, this isn't what I wanted to do. Now, in hindsight,
Lies.
that would have been a great job. But remember, everything happens for a reason, right? So,
Absolutely.
so I tell them before even graduating basic training and going to NDOC, before all of that, I raise my hand. I'm like, this is not the job I want to do. And they're like, cool, man. Like you DNR, and we'll send you back to military personnel and you can pick your new job. So by this time, because of that basic training flight, I've got a pretty good understanding of what special tactics is, the different jobs. And I'm like, all right, I either want to be a CCT or a TAC P. And I was honestly, for most of my career, I leaned more towards TAC P just because they're more JTAC centric.
Yep.
The work that they do with the Army, whether it's infantry or ODAs, whatever, TAC P seemed like a really great job. So I go back to the personnel section and they hand me this list of all these jobs I can do based on my ASVAB scores. I want to do TAC P, and they're like, you can't. I want to do CCT, and they're like, you can't. I'm like, why can't I do these jobs? And they're like, well, you've already passed your window for your flight physical, and these require a different flight physical than the one you got. And that would put you in a holdover status for too long, so you can't do these jobs. I'm like, all right. She's like, the staff sergeant that I'm talking to, she's like, you seem like a hard charger, though. She's like, what about security forces? I'm like, what's that? She's like, you see these guys running around Lackland, they've got the face paint on, they've got the guns and the body armor. I'm like, yeah, with the black berets. And she's like, well, they're blue, but yeah. I'm like, what are those dudes all about? She's like, well, that's they're basically the infantry of the Air Force. Dude.
The famous words.
I know it, dude. And I was in.
That's going to be on a meme today, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. I'm like, all right, that's what I'm doing for sure. Infantry of the Air Force, get a sweet looking cap out of the deal. And all their logos, because your tech school for security forces is on Lackland where you go through basics. So you go into the PX and you see security forces and it's like a skull with a beret and a dagger going through it. Definitely ripped off of special forces, but it's, that imagery's everywhere. And you're like, all right, these dudes are badass. So I get bit by a brown recluse, get staph infection, and I become a holdover for 4 or 5 weeks, way past that window it would have taken for me to get my flight physical.
Where did you get bit by a brown? Where at?
So one was in the sleeve of my blouse. so yeah, one day we were getting dressed for the day, drill instructor screaming at you, and I get dressed and I feel something. I kind of slap it, and just over the next probably 3 days, it turned into like it looked like somebody had cut a golf ball in half
In
and
your
put it
arm?
underneath my arm. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, like right here. So I had to
oof,
go and get it cut out and drained, and they hand you like it looks like a prescription bottle full of the little
the
packing
gauze. Yeah.
gauze, the little ribbon, and I had to pack it myself in my basic training dorm. But yeah, so I just thought it was funny that I wound up being a holdover anyway, and like had I gotten one of those special tactics jobs I wanted, like the
Yeah,
timeline would have been perfect. But again, everything happens for a reason, right?
it
So
does.
um, I start Security Forces Tech School a couple weeks behind everyone that I graduated basic with, but I actually met my wife in that class.
No way.
Um, yeah, so we're out here just beating the stereotype. We've been married almost 17 years. It'll be 17 years in April. And
Congratulations, man. That's
yep,
awesome.
she was prior Security Forces too. Um, so got into that job, very excited, man. I was very moto all through tech school, get to my first base, and you're like, it's like that scene from the newer 21 Jump Street where
Yeah.
Jonah Hill looks over at Channing Tatum's like, you ready for a lifetime of being badass motherfuckers? And then you flash forward to me sitting on a flight line in a Ford F-150 for 12 hours a day, just being like, what is
Oh
this job?
fuck. Yeah. And
Um,
it's one of those I forget what we call them MOS in the Army. AFCs? Is it AF?
AFSC, yeah.
AFSCs?
Air Force Specialty Code.
That job has so much stress and has like so many people are constantly going for mental health related incidents and asking for resources coming out of security forces. It
Yeah.
is not an easy job, and we bust everybody's ball. I like to say that we're equal opportunity ball busters when it comes to the memes, but I
Yeah,
have to
dude,
say,
it's
security forces, they do have a reputation for being extra fucking hard on their people, man.
dude, they're hard on their people. When I got into criminal investigations in the Air Force, they were our biggest customer, right? You were busting more cops,
Yeah,
um, cops and maintainers. It's also because those are the two largest career fields, but they were
yeah.
wild. But I'll say, dude, I always tell people it's the best job I ever had. And one still to this day, and I say this very honestly, right? I've gone from the 49th Security Forces Squadron in Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico, all the way to a Tier 1 SMU at the end of my career. And
Wow.
still, some of the most impressive people I've worked with were defenders, dude. There's some really squared away dudes in that job who are good at it, and some great leaders. Ranger qualified guys that I've worked with. For every one of them, there's probably 10 just absolute goobers. Um, but there's
love,
some impressive
love
people in
that
that
word.
career field. And one thing I'll say about it, man, is like any combat arms guy that I talk to, if you really want to get down to it, like, what's the worst part of being in the infantry besides like when the garrison commander makes you go weed eat and stuff like that? It's
Yeah.
like it's pulling security, right? No one that I've ever talked to who was at a fob or cops somewhere in a shithole in Afghanistan was like, yeah, man, the best part was when it's 2 a.m. and I'm sitting in this makeshift tower pulling security. That job sucks.
Yeah.
But that's security forces role, right? They're not the dudes who go in and kick down doors. They're not out doing, for the most part, doing dismounted patrols and stuff like that. Their job's to sit in that tower so that everyone else can get some shut eye, can do their job. And there's dudes that hate the job, but the ones who stick around, the ones who get really good at that, I've got a lot of respect for that career field. And if you are good at your job, it's not hard to be. If you shine just a little bit, there's tons of opportunities, man. I know defenders that I've worked with that have gone to Army sniper school, um, that have gone on to do stuff with different tier 1 units. I know a guy, I think right now he's still attached to some ODAs and the DEA, and he's working Southcom stuff, counter drugs, and he's a defender, but he's just a really squared away dude. There's all kinds of schools you can go to, cool stuff
Yeah.
that you can do in that job. But for me, 2 years was enough. So I got my first deployment out of that job. I got to do flyaway security, which is essentially anytime a C-130, this was '08, anytime a C-130 landed outside of established perimeter. So a lot of dirt strip landings in Afghanistan, resupplying ODAs and stuff like that. Um, they needed at least 2 security guys on it. So if you're doing it as part of your job in the Air Force, you're called a Raven.
I was gonna say
Um,
the Raven guys.
yeah, for if you're doing it just deployed, it's called fast or hey fucker. Um, yeah, because like Ravens, man, they fall
I want to
under
see
air.
that on a
Yeah,
motivational like patch.
the Ravens, they actually fall underneath Air Mobility Command, and
Oh,
there's
really?
regulations for those guys. So they're considered air crew. They can get air medals. They're entitled to crew rest, just like pilots, loadmasters, all that stuff are. So there's a lot of benefits to being a Raven if you're a fast guy, and you don't have that, man. So there were missions that first deployment where you'd come back from a 6 hour mission, you'd hit your rack, and then 2 hours later you're getting woken up, and it was like, hey, there's another no notice or short notice mission. They need security, go, and you were out the door again. I remember several times in that first deployment walking around just feeling drunk, man, because I was so tired because we were just ramping up. This was leading up to, I was there '08 to '09, so this was leading up to the big surge.
Yeah.
Um, and I was on a couple flights where we airdropped some dudes into Kandahar, which was pretty cool. I think some guys from 10th Mountain and a bunch of Marines. Uh, but anyway, that was also my first introduction to JSOC and working with different units from there. Because again, if you're squared away in your job with security forces, not hard to be. There's some advantages, and we had some dudes who were just absolute ham sandwiches on that mission. And dudes falling asleep while we're doing in-flight
Mm.
security. You've got a bunch of Afghans on the plane; they're falling asleep, and that happened on one of these JSOC call sign missions. And the dudes, somebody, went to the commander of the flying unit and was just like, "Hey, we don't want those security guys." And they by name requested myself and this guy named DJ. He was like a E5 at the time. So we got to fly all those missions, and sometimes those were the short notice ones, but it was cool to get that exposure and uh, not to necessarily do cool things because I was just a security guy. Plane would land, I run off, and at sometimes I'm holding security for you know dudes from Delta or whatever, and it's like they don't
Yep.
need me to hold their security, but just to be a part of it, man, just to see what was going on and get a better understanding of how special operations worked in country.
Hey, everybody
Uh,
has their part to play, man.
oh,
Everybody
absolutely,
has a
man.
role, dude.
Yeah,
Your ability to provide that security, because shit, there's plenty of times we're flying with our Afghan guys from one base to another, and yeah, another set of eyes on. You never know when motherfuckers if somebody's gonna fucking do something wild and crazy. Yeah, an
that's right,
extra set
man.
of American eyes, absolutely.
And if those dudes have to do my job, then they're setting down some part of their job. So yeah,
Bingo.
it was cool to be a part of. Kind of lit a fire inside of me, back for that special tactics role. Um, so about 2.5 years after doing that, I was placed in the armory on base and got exposure to a shred out of security forces called Combat Arms Training and Maintenance, CADM. So you are the firearms instructors for the entire Air Force. You do all of the quals, all of the training, and then you go to armor school, get all the weapons maintenance stuff. So I thought that seemed like a pretty good way to spend your time. It was definitely better than
Yeah.
sitting on the flight line. And the dudes at the CADM shop at my first base they were awesome. It was a great job because you show up at 7 in the morning. Maybe you teach a 9 mil class to just the base populace, medical group, dental, some
Yeah.
maintainers, whatever. Usually done by about noon. And then we would do our own training, or we'd light up the smoker and have a brisket going. It was just all kinds of stuff. It was a cool job. But ultimately, I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. I'd gotten a recruitment email from the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, which is the Air Force's Tier 1 component, and it was to go there to be a combat arms instructor. So I was talking to the recruiter, and it seemed like a great opportunity. It seemed like everything I wanted, but it was like I'm still just going to be sitting in the armory while
Yeah.
these dudes go out and do their thing. So I ultimately passed on that opportunity, started training again to retrain in attack P, and I met an OSI agent. Dude comes out to the range one day. His name was Chester McBride, and he'll come back into the story in a second. But this dude shows up to the range one day. He's freaking yoked. He's got all kind of cool guy kit on. We put him through his qual, and he's got one of the best qualifications I'd seen in a long time. Just awesome groups, very competent with a firearm, whether it was pistol, rifle, whatever. You could tell he just knew what he was doing. So I start talking with him, and I'm like, all right, what's the lowdown on uh, OSI? Because I'm thinking about retraining in a TAC-P. And he's like, well, we've got an agent who's a former TAC-P named Ben, if you want to talk with him. But, basically it boiled down to, and Ben came in the conversation, but he's like, look, he's like, TAC-P, combat control, all those jobs are great. If that's what you want to do, go for it. He's like, but those dudes only have a mission, when they're deployed, and their tempo is pretty high right now. Uh, I was married, had 3 young kids. The pitch they gave me was, OSI has a mission 24/7. Whether you're downrange or you're home station, you're doing good stuff. They threw out, OSI is the executive agency for the Air Force for counterterrorism. Oh, that sounds awesome. And I'll caveat that with, they're talking about if an airman is radicalized or is supporting a terrorist organization. They're not talking about going out and kicking down doors.
Yeah.
But that's what I had in my mind. They're like, we've got this anti-terrorism specialty team, and these dudes are searching caves in Afghanistan. It's like, yeah, they
Like
did
Jack
that in
Bauer.
they did that in like '02 when no one knew what was going on. But it's like that was a really small thing. There was a couple pictures of OSI agents wearing like cool hats with like decked out M4s, and they're in a cave. Dude, that happened once. That became the selling point for generations of OSI agent recruitments.
You do something one time, it becomes legendary and epic.
Yeah. But ultimately, retrained in OSI, got stationed in J-Bear, Alaska, coolest place I ever lived, and started out with criminal investigations and rolled into counterintelligence work, which has been, I'd say, the body of my career. So through OSI, I got sent on my 3rd deployment. That was back to Bagram. And I was super excited about it because Chester, the guy who recruited me in OSI, he was there. He's gonna be one of my teammates. Guy named Michael Cinco, who I went through the academy FLETC with. He was my roommate on that deployment. Guy named Peter Taub, who was my partner for the FBI put on this with their high value detainee interrogations group. They put on like a cognitive interviewing and interrogations course. So it's a pretty big deal. It was like a pilot program, but me and Pete got to go through that together. So there are at least 3 dudes that I knew pretty well and had history with going to be on my team in addition to the rest. So we went to an expeditionary detachment there, and OSI has a lot of roles downrange from big J2 stuff all the way down to what we're doing with the EDETs, and that is it's CI support to force protection and it's counter threat operations. So ultimately, the goal is keeping the airfield green. If you've got incoming, planes aren't taking off until the all clear is sounded, right? You can't have dudes on the flight line while rockets are coming in. So it's vitally important for us to keep that airfield green. So we're looking for, the actual dudes launching rockets. We're looking for the facilitators. We're looking for the financiers. And in the best cases, we're going off base. We're in the villages and we're taking their shit when we can find it. If they've got a weapons cache, it's ours now. And we would work with EOD. And I spent a lot of time working with 3rd Group and 19th Group on that deployment out of Camp Vance. So some really good dudes there. But so one of those patrols, and there's a lot more to this story for people in the know. There was definitely some intelligence failures from task force level. There was just a lot. I'll say on our front, there may have been some complacency, but ultimately, I guess that's all I'll say about that. But 21 December 2015, I'll take one step back. So the way that we were planning these missions, it was typically 2 agent teams. So an agent team consisted of 2 special agents, a linguist, and we had an analyst that would obviously stay back on the base. But the 2 agents and their linguist would lead a patrol of security forces, tactical security element members. We were doing source meets. We were looking for those weapons caches, and you would have a backup agent team with you. So 4 agents on the ground, 2 linguists, and your group of security forces. Sometimes we take a JTAC, sometimes EOD, whatever. So this particular mission, Cinco planned the mission, my roommate, and he put me and my partner Gage on that mission initially. And I came to him probably a week before the mission and was like, hey man, like me and Gage have a bunch of sorts meets this week. We've got 2 outside the wire missions of our own. We're just getting crushed right now. Would you mind switching us with Team Thunder, which was Pete and John's team? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So that day comes. we're sitting back, kind of QRF posture type of thing, but not really involved. And uh, we get a banging on our door, and it's one of our we had our own embedded ISR, so it's one of our drone operators, and he's like, "Dude, team just got hit. Everybody's down." And I'm just like, "Dude, don't fuck around like that. Like, don't say that shit.
Yeah.
It's not funny." And his eyes start welling up, and I'm like, "Oh shit, this is for real." So I run back down to our talk, and you can see everything on on the uh, on the screen, and it's bodies laid out. Um, I feel a little guilty about it because at the time I saw what looked like dark uniforms, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, our guys are good. It's just Afghans that are down. Well, I mean, that's a shitty thing to say. That's a human being, right? But at the
Yeah,
same time, it's not my guys.
exactly. Yeah. Anybody that's deployed understands. And if you're in that similar situation, you're watching this shit from the inside the talk, like that's something you're looking for reassurance, any sign that it's not US, that it's not
Yeah.
your dudes. Yeah.
So we're spinning up Kazivac, and I look over at it, me and my partner Gage. We look at our SEL, and we're like, "What do you need?" And he's like, "Just get to the Kazivac point." So we load up in our truck, we take off, and that's really where it hit me for the first time because I start going, everybody except for one, Chester, just a strong fucking person. Like he made it all the way to an operating table. Me and Gage actually carried him to the operating table, um, and we watched him crack his chest. And he fought to the very end. But everyone else was, it was what it was. But seeing everybody, um, that I'd say that's the initial breaking point for me. Um, and then a dude, what was this guy's name? He was third group. I can't think of it right now. Uh, he was on the cover of Rolling Stones magazine and actually got recalled from country. Um, but he was one of the main guys we were working with at the time. Name might come to me. But anyway, he came over to me, man, and he wraps me up in a bear hug, and he whispers in my ear, he's like, "We're gonna kill every last one of these motherfuckers." I'm like, "All right," and that's kind of how we finished out that deployment. We were working with third group a lot, a bunch of dudes from 20th, and I think some 19th group guys rolled into some guard bums. Um, and I don't mean that like disrespectfully. I mean
No,
they
no,
would jump from deployment to deployment, like,
exactly.
you know what I mean?
That's one of the
Um,
biggest open secrets about soft guys that are in the 19th and 20th group. They would just
yeah,
the endless summers, we like to call it. They would just bum from deployment to deployment. A lot of guys just did not want to live at home and did not want, or it was just collecting money and collecting a paycheck. But for a vast majority, it
yeah,
was just the adventure seeking of and the freedom, because everybody always needs one more extra guy. So it
right.
was incredibly, it was one of the things that made it very alluring to go to the guard side, be able to jump from deployment to deployment, from team to team. So yeah, it's
Yeah, they had a lot of knowledge, man. Dave Kaiser was that guy's name. I think he was a sergeant first class. Um, yeah, Dave Kaiser was the main guy I worked with for third group.
yeah,
Yeah, anyway, so that deployment was kind of from then on out was kind of nose down. We were getting revenge for our dudes. We got a lot of good work done. So I think I left there with, we keep a board in each of our little team rooms, and I had 12 faces up on that board, just for my team. Um, so kind of proud walking out of there, but didn't really take the time that I needed to process what happened.
mm,
Um,
yep,
and I got the all clear. Again, everything happens for a reason, right? So we go through that attack. One of the first things that the Air Force does, I think within 2 days, we had an operational psychologist on the ground
good,
evaluating our dudes. And she spent about a month there on the ground with us, talking with us, looking at our ops, evaluating dudes for TBIs. And some of the guys, she said, "Hey, you need to go home. Like you're not good." But I got the thumbs up. So finished out that deployment, got back home to Alaska, and it's April at this point, so weather's great. My wife and kids were on spring break for the first week that I was on R&R, so again, I'm distracted there. But as soon as they went back to school, my wife became a school teacher. So as soon as they went back to school, man, it hit me, and
yeah,
and it was that hole that I'm sure anyone who's listening to your podcast has already heard about, right? You're going down that hole. It's drinking. I'm not getting out of bed till like 3 p.m. I'm in Alaska. I should be fly fishing or just out doing
yeah.
all the
Out
things,
in
the
nature,
outdoor
doing all
stuff
the
that I
things you've
love.
been waiting to do. Yeah,
I'm not doing any of it, man. And it got to the point, I will credit the military for, as bad as the services suck. I'll credit the umpteen freaking briefings that I had to sit through about PTSD and mental health awareness,
Yeah.
because when it started happening to me, those briefings came back and I started recognizing some of those signs. Like, all right,
Good. Good.
I'm not right. Something's fucked up here. So one day I told myself, like, you have to get outside of the house. I was already on vitamin D pills just because Alaska makes you vitamin D deficient. But I knew I was like, you need some vitamin D. You need to get out of the house. You need to go do something. You need to clear your head. So I had a bow case laying in the garage. I'd been shooting a bow just for fun and for hunting unsuccessfully up to that point, but I had a bow. Um, so I grab it. I go 2 minutes down the road. I lived on base and there was a great archery range there on Fort Rich. And I draw it back, dude, like kind of half-ass, put one in, I'm aiming at the center of the target, but it hits like a foot to the right. I'm just like, oh, that was a shitty shot. So I knock another arrow and I shoot again and I drill the center. And I probably spent about 2 hours out there, locked in, drilling that target, after that initial shot. And it was maybe that afternoon or maybe a couple days later, but I realized like, hey, that 2 hours was the first time in probably 8 months that I didn't think about 21 December. I didn't think about,
Yep.
we call them the Hustler Six. We lost 6 team members in total. And our call sign was Hustler Six. So they became the Hustler Six. So that was the first time I didn't think about the Hustler Six. Um, I said, hey, maybe there's something to this, but it also going back to those briefings, right? Like it made me realize like, all right, if I saw benefit from archery, then there's something that I'm covering up.
Yep.
So it ultimately, I kept shooting my bow, but it made me go in and talk to my detachment commander at the time, who he had been blown up in Iraq years before and almost died. He was ripped in half. I mean, he had a scar from his sternum all the way down his center line and then up his back. It's a miracle he didn't die, but obviously he had some struggles with that. So did a one-on-one with him. He actually brought in a chaplain and a counselor into the detachment and kind of made it a coverall. Like, hey, I want everyone to take advantage of this. They're going to park in the conference room, and if you just want to go in there, go in there. So he kind of broke the stigma down. I think after like a day or two, nobody went in. So he was just like, all right, I'm scheduling everybody a block. You can go in there, do what you want. So he like forced his people to
That's a
go
good
talk
man.
to mental health. But at that point I had to. So I went in there, I talked to a doc for the first time, uh, kept seeing a doc on base. And it led to a lot, and it also
Yeah.
led me to want to acknowledge that I needed to fix it. So I'm getting ready to leave Alaska. I'm slated for a job at OSI headquarters in DC, like doing the most miserable thing possible, like reviewing closed case files. And I'm
That
just
sounds
like,
exciting, Jason.
yeah, dude, I'm ready to get out of the Air Force. I'm ready for something different. And I get a call from Doc Lambrick, the psych doc that they sent out on that deployment. And she's like, hey, I'm doing something new. I'm at a unit. I can't really tell you anything about it, but I think you should try out. And I'm like, well, where's it at? She's like, it's at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I'm like, all right, you have my interest. So, so literally with like a week's notice, I'm getting a flight out to Fort Bragg to go through this selection. And I get on the ground and I'm with a bunch of super impressive dudes. Um, go through this process and like, I don't know, I don't want to sound like a douchebag here, but I thought looking at the people I'm going through selection with, I'm like, there's not a chance in hell. Like I'm nobody.
Yeah.
And I'm the only dude that got the thumbs up from that process. Um, so rolled into an SMU doing, it was a weird deal because I was still AdCon to Air Force OSI under our special projects division, but I was OpCon and TACON to this unit. And our mission was primarily like AFO and OPE type stuff. Um, it definitely fit the world that I was used to because it was all plain clothes,
Yeah.
yeah, very cool stuff. But I say it was the best and worst time of my career. It's the best time because it was obviously it's the coolest mission you can ever do. Everyone from my team leaders who were all operators, all the way down to like the finance guy that sat in our unit, was the best fucking person at their job. You know what I mean? Like everyone was just squared away, and it's like
Yep.
this is the promised land. This is where I belong. Um, and I did that for 3 years. and I made Master Sergeant and got told by Big Blue, like, hey, we're going to take all of your leadership and experience and we're going to put you at headquarters finally. Um, and I kind of knew it was coming. I won NCO of the year. I'd done all kinds of good stuff. And that's where they get you. So I was coming up on my ETS, and I basically just decided, like, look, because of the work we were doing and the units we were getting to train with, I spent a lot of time with a couple people from FBI's HRT,
Yep.
and they're like, yeah, man, come on over. Like, you're a shoe-in. We have one of the guys who was leading one of the squadrons at HRT was also a Green Beret colonel, but he was the IMA or reserve commander at another tier 1 unit that's up in like Northern Virginia. So he's like, hey man, like, you join the reserves, we'll roll you into this. You do your 2 years in the field, you're coming to HRT, like, no doubt about it. All right, so 2019, I left active duty, joined the FBI, and that was my plan, was to go HRT. But there's this weird thing that happens, like when you get out, when you leave active duty, right? Um, I think some of the stuff that I experienced, some of the traumas that I've dealt with, there was always this sense that, like, I'll be back to deal with this, whether it was in Afghanistan or wherever. It's like, all right, maybe it wasn't this rotation, but next rotation, like, we'll get it done.
Yeah.
And then when you get out, you've got this identity crisis that happens.
Yep.
I went from being, what I considered a tier 1 operator. I was a direct support guy. I don't want to like overstate my role there.
But
But
absolutely. But yeah,
got to do really cool stuff.
You
but,
worked your ass off, and you were working at some very, very elite levels, man.
Yeah, dude, it was dope. That's what made it the worst part, because the imposter syndrome for me was real. Because I've always just seen myself as, hey, I'm just a dude, and I'm walking around with these giants, man, like dudes from ops that they make movies about. It's like, man, you're that dude.
And the funny thing is, Jason, like, everyone that I've talked to, everyone has that. Every motherfucker has that, even at the ODA level. And I can completely understand how much more complex it is, because you're like, well, I'm just some fucking security forces guy. I'm just an OSI guy. I'm just, really good at, but I'm not this guy. It's like, bro, where you started out from, man. Like, where you started out from and where you ended.
Yeah, man.
Holy shit.
It's definitely humbling to look back and think of it, man. It's like I went from sitting on a flight line or like scanning your CAC, have a good day, to yeah, dude, I'm at Fort Bragg just doing shit that I never even dreamed was possible.
Yeah.
So it was awesome. But ultimately, like I said, I couldn't do that anymore. I kind of reached the pinnacle of my career, and they were like, hey, we're gonna, you're a Master Sergeant now, we're moving you. And it's like, nah, I'm out. So joined the FBI. Ultimately, that turned out not to be for me. Moving to Central Virginia, where the FBI stationed me in Lynchburg, Virginia, in a little small office. That was our 7th move as a family. And it was the first one where my wife and kids just like got on the ground immediately and just thrived. My wife was like, this feels like home. So for me to keep them there for 2 years and then uproot them again to go to Northern Virginia to do the HRT gig, I'm just like,
no,
not in the cards. But also I had to be realistic with myself, because when I was at Fort Bragg, we had access to world-class facilities, whether it was gyms, trainers, nutritionists, physical therapists, docs, whatever. I was at my peak. A couple years later, and then COVID hits. I'm kind of falling apart. I'm starting to have severe. I found out I've got a bunch of herniated disc in my back. I've got femoral aciotubular impingement. My knees are fucked. My head is fucked. And it's just like, you know what? Let me be responsible here. Like, do I need to be that dude? Do I need to go and try to prove something and join HRT with the issues that I know I have? Or can I just, I've already gotten that T-shirt to a certain extent. I'm good. So I let that dream sail, and ultimately just found myself unhappy with the FBI. Whether it was the work I was doing. I mean, I did some meaningful shit. I rescued 4 kidnapped children.
Holy shit.
I worked crimes against children. I worked counterterrorism. I worked violent gangs. I mean, I was in a small office, so I had the ability to do just about anything I wanted.
Yeah.
And got to work with, a lot of the local agencies and some federal partners, just because there wasn't, there weren't a lot of us out there. But ultimately, just seeing the politics at play with the FBI, the way things kind of went, and everything you're seeing coming to light now, that was ultimately a turning point for me. It was just like I need to do something else.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all that, I'm shooting my bow, and I've got a buddy, my co-founder Ray. His story is he worked crimes against children for the Air Force. I think at one time he was like one of only 3 child forensic interviewers in the whole Air Force. So anytime a
Wow.
child was victimized, he was put on the case. Um, he's seen a lot of terrible shit. So
I can
he
only imagine,
also,
man.
on his own found out that archery helped him. So he and I started talking, and I'm like, man, I got this idea. Like, we're just going to start introducing dudes, vets and first responders. We're going to introduce them to archery. We're going to coach them along. We're going to show them what archery did for us, because we were both having issues with the VA.
Yep.
Just whether it was like shitty doctors, or sometimes it's not even that it's a bad doctor, but it's a lack of availability. There's so many people that need the services. And at my VA here, it's like, yeah, man, like, we can get you in 12 months.
Yeah.
What do I do for a year, man? Well, my head's fucked. Um, so I tell Ray, like, I've got this idea. We're gonna start this thing, and we call it ENDEX Archery for 2 reasons. Index, as most of your listeners know, means end of exercise. And for me, I saw a lot of my brothers and sisters in arms, their approach to their mental health was an exercise in futility, meaning that they were using alcohol,
Yep.
drugs, risky behavior, all this terrible shit that's not improving their lives. That's what they're using to cover their PTSD. So that's an exercise in futility. And then also the whole VA route, like, you're just a hamster in a wheel.
Yep.
So we're going to call index and all that. We're going to find ways to get people, um, one, the individual help they need, and 2, I think social wellness is huge too. So introduce them to a community that is uplifting and supportive, and has some resources. So we launched Index as just like he and I going to mentor some folks. And about the 3rd person that I introduced to archery and then walked into a bow shop and watched them spend about $2,000 of their own money, I just said, there's got to be something else, because watching people spend that much money sucks.
Yeah.
So we formulated the nonprofit, with the goal of, we provide 100% of the equipment that people need to get into the sport. And then we mentor them personally. And then the end goal is to introduce them, whether that's an indoor shooting league, an outdoor 3D league, or some type of community where they can bond with people, and
Yep.
the archery community's got a lot of veterans, a lot of first responders anyway, but it's also a lot of good old boys. And, you kind of get that thing, you're standing at a target, there's 5 of you, you shoot a 10 when you were going for a 12, and somebody's like, nice shot, but you suck. And you smile about it, right? And
Yep.
it's what we find in the veteran community. If you're not being fucked with, and it's probably because they don't like you. So that was the start of Index. The FBI's got this really cool program. If you're involved in a critical incident, so a shooting or some mass casualty, something like that, they do this post-critical incident seminar. So my squad was involved in a shooting. No cool story, nothing really serious, but it was an agent-involved shooting. So I got an invite to this program, and it was kind of twofold. The guy, the employee assistance coordinator, knew me and knew of Index and what I was trying to do. So he was like, hey, you qualify because of this incident you were involved in, but also I think this would be really cool for you to see for your nonprofit. So they send you to Disney for a week. You put up in a resort, and it's packed full. I mean, you wake up at 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. It is different wellness modalities, be it yoga,
Hell yeah.
guided meditations, breathing exercises. It's one-on-ones with counselors. It's group sessions with counselors. It's just 5 days of just everything that you can put in your toolbox. And that for me was an epiphany, because it's like I can really take Index to the next level if I build my own wellness center. It
Yep.
becomes archery focused, but I can bring dudes from all over the country, put them through a 5-day intensive, introduce them to archery, and then every other tool that we can imagine, and then send them back home to an Index ambassador to continue the work and make sure that there's follow through there. So that's what we're building towards. Right now, we're still on a one-on-one basis. We work with people struggling with PTSD, introduce them to the sport, and introduce them to that community aspect of it. But as we're growing, we're conducting research with psychologists and licensed professional counselors. And it's my goal to buy property and build a wellness center here in Central Virginia. And it's similar to a lot of things that are going on. One, if you've probably heard of a Big Sky Bravery.
Oh yeah,
They're
about
for active.
just talked to them this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, so something similar to what they have going on. And then my other goal is to bring in as many nonprofit resources as possible, because I don't
Yeah.
do hunts. I'm step one. I hand a guy a bow for the first time. He's not ready to hunt. But in a year from now, I can pass him off to a good buddy of mine, is a guy named Tony Cowden.
I was just gonna say the reason outdoors.
Yeah, so I
just
give
had Tony on last night. Yeah.
Tony. Yeah, Tony's a good dude, man. He actually,
Oh,
I
he's
met
crazy,
him.
man. He's great. He's a fucking riot, man.
He came out and instructed one of our shooting packages when I was at the unit. We did like a 3-day thing at this place called Spartan Ranch.
Yeah.
And he was our instructor, and I was like, this dude's badass. But yeah, I can pass him off to the Reason Outdoors, Operation Pay It Forward. Maybe a guy comes into our program, we identify that archery is just not for him. Project Healing Waters, hey, maybe we could try fly fishing.
Yep.
If they're still active, hey, have you heard of Big Sky Bravery? There's all of these nonprofits out there. We can pool our resources and kind of make it a cycle, where I take a dude from day one with a bow, get him on a hunt. Now he's ready to introduce his friend, and he comes back with his friend, and now he's a mentor during our 5-day wellness intensive. And the cycle continues.
Dude, Jason, I have no doubt this is gonna fucking pan out and work. You are driven and dedicated to this, just like you were in your mission when you were still in, man. And it's great to connect with you. We got to stay in touch, because I've got some big things. I'm not gonna announce them right now. But yeah, dude, Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on here today, sharing your story. It's stories like this that give individuals who are listening, our audience, the understanding that they can overcome their stuff too. You don't have to sit there and sit in your room alone. Get outside, get in some sun, pick up your bow. And if you don't have one, well, hey, I got a buddy right now, Jason McCoy. Hit him up on ENDEX Archery. And the link to his website will be in the episode description. If you want to check him out on Instagram, it will be there as well. Jason, thank you for being here today, man. Thank you for sharing your story. Can't wait to have you back on. I know this is going to blow up. I can't wait to see where this journey takes you, man. It's been incredible just having you here, dude.
I appreciate it, man.
If you could tell us the website real quick, what's your website?
Yeah, it's endexarchery.org. That's ENDEX archery.org. And then same on all of our socials, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff.
Hell yeah. There you have it, folks. Thank you guys for tuning in. And hey, head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give me 5 seconds of your time, maybe 10. Hit us up, give us a review, pass us off to a friend, and help us grow. We appreciate it. Again, thank you, Jason. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.